This is the TFO NTR Fly Reel, and it's the very first TFO Fly Reel I've ever reviewed. So let's jump into it. The NTR is TFO's value-priced, fully machined fly reel. They make it in a variety of sizes, and it comes in, at least in this 2 size, at about $190, which puts it sort of on the lower end of spectrum of fly reels. And while $190 is definitely not cheap, when it comes to true, fully machined fly reels, it's actually one of the cheaper ones out there. And while this might look a lot like a cheeky reel, this doesn't have a sealed drag, and there's some other feature differences that set it apart and allow TFO to make it at a lower price point. That said, if fully machined is not a requirement, this is a really competitive segment. There are just a lot of reels out there that do fairly similar things at a fairly similar price point. And to find out how this reel may or may not be better, let's get started by talking about the drag. The NTR is a full drag reel, and it goes from 0 to max drag in about 1.7 turns, which is a nice amount of adjustability. When you do crank it down all the way, you're gonna get a couple of pounds on this size 2. It is definitely not a super strong drag. I also didn't try really hard to get it all the way locked down. It's just not reasonable in most fishing situations to try to do that. The drag, as I've already mentioned, is also not sealed. So this is gonna be a reel that's more suited for freshwater fishing than it is for saltwater fishing. And for those freshwater situations, you're gonna have more than enough drag strength to stop any little trout or a bass or a pike. So let's talk about the spool. And this is definitely not a huge fly reel. And while this isn't a huge reel, I will say it is a true large arbor, even by today's standards. And what I mean by that is we've got a max spool diameter of 3.27 inches, a width of 1.1 inches, and an arbor size of 2.28 inches. All that being said, it's going to yield a retrieval rate of about 7.75 inches per turn, or 155 turns for your 100-foot fly line. That's going to put this reel at a fairly average 5-weight reel in terms of spool and retrieval rate. It's also going to hold about 100 yards of backing with your 5-weight line, which is a totally reasonable amount of backing to put on a 5-weight. What is interesting though, and you'll see this trend throughout, is that this reel on the TFO website claims to hold 100 yards with a 6-weight. And I can assure you that unless you're using some super thin diameter backing, that's gonna be a really tight fit. Stick to that 100 with a 5-weight, maybe something in the 50 to 75 range for your 6-weight. And I think that's yet another interesting quirk of the marketing on this reel. TFO doesn't specifically call this a 5-weight reel. They're really pushing it more towards a 6-weight. Now, I don't know if that's sort of their predilection for warm water species or what's going on there, but to me, this is squarely a 5-weight sized reel. And again, we're reviewing the size 2 here. And with 5 weights being the most popular size in fly fishing, you would think they would have that front and center, but alas, they don't. And the trend of odd marketing choices gets a little bit deeper as we talk about weight. And the weight of this reel is actually a really fairly nice 4.9 ounces. However, on the website, they list it at 5.9 ounces. So they're telling you that their own reel is actually a full ounce heavier than it actually is. Not sure why. At a hair under 5 ounces, this reel is sort of about average for modern fly reels. It's kind of what you'd expect if you grabbed a fly reel off the shelf. And it's gonna work really well with most fly rods. It's definitely not too heavy. At 6 ounces, that's starting to push into a heavier reel, but this one isn't. So I guess don't believe the TFO website. This review is brought to you by Trident Travel, which is our new destination travel service where you'll get our expert advice, planning, and guidance at no additional cost. That means no credit card fees, no booking fees, and for a limited time, you'll even earn Trident rewards on your travel bookings. So with every trip you book, you'll be earning valuable points that you can use towards free tackle here at Trident. recently we've had some clients go on some absolutely fantastic trips like bone fishing in Belize, steelhead fishing in BC, and tarpon fishing in Belize. So if you're thinking about taking a fly fishing trip, Trident Travel is the way to do it. We've got a ton of great destinations, excellent service, and even more destinations being added every month. Check us out at tridentflyfishing.com/travel. And let's move on to the sound. And the sound on this reel is going to be a silent retrieve, which, as you know, if you watched a lot of these videos, is not my favorite. I do prefer some sort of a click. And that sort of gets worse because on the outgoing, it's also very muted. Why don't you have a listen? So, like I said, very muted on the outgoing, totally silent on the incoming. Definitely not my favorite. I would say that's going to be one of the weaker points of this reel. If you're looking for that sound, if you're looking for that feedback, you're not going to find it here. So let's move on to the ergonomics, and the ergonomics are fairly reasonable. It's got this pretty cool, fully machined handle. You'll see that on the likes of Hatch and some really high-end reels. And while I think machining a handle is actually a bit overboard, if you drop it, you can get a nick in there that just isn't going to feel as nice as a Delrin or a plastic. But they did a really good job on this, and at least as it comes out of the box, it's a pretty nice handle. And at this price point, it's definitely one of the better handles out there. The drag knob is also fully machined, which is nice. It's easy to grip, albeit it's a little bit too narrow for my liking. Again, as I discussed earlier, if you want to really crank this down, it's a little bit tough to do. The spool release is easy. You can just take it right off. If you were confused about what the NTR stands for, it stands for no tools required. While most fly reels don't require any tools, this reel takes it one step further, because if you want to switch the retrieve, which literally no one has ever done more than once on a fly reel, you can do that without a tool here, and thereby continuing the trend of strange marketing for this pretty normal and fairly reasonable fly reel. But the odd marketing doesn't stop there, and in fact, the first paragraph when you go to the TFO website tells you that you do not need an Ivy League degree to operate this fly reel. I personally haven't met a fly reel yet that did require an Ivy League degree, but who knows? Maybe there's one out there. Overall, this is actually a fairly solid reel that provides a reasonable value if you're looking for that fully machined and anodized fly reel. It does pretty much everything you need for a freshwater reel, and it does it in a reasonably nice looking package at a fairly reasonable price. That said, it's not the most unique reel out there. It does share a lot of sort of visual cues with the Cheeky, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Both this and the Cheekies are fairly reasonably nice looking fly reels. Overall, my biggest complaint on this TFO is with the sound, and if I were really being picky, I wish it had a little bit more drag. But again, it's not something that you're going to need for most of those freshwater fishing situations. Last but not least is going to be the price. And the price, as I've already mentioned, comes in at $190. And while we've already discussed it in some depth, I do think it is a reasonable value, and it is one of the lowest priced, fully machined, fully anodized reels on the market. That said, if you're looking for a price point reel, I think you can get better pretty much everything else by skipping the machined and anodized portion, but that's going to be something that is totally up to you. Tell us what you think about the no tools required fly reel, and which tool you like to use on your fly reels by leaving us a comment in the box below. If you've got questions, we've got answers. Give us a call at 888-413-5211 or email us 24/7 at support@tridentflyfishing.com. I'm Ben. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.